Colleagues who are joining us, we're just waiting for Dr. Walstra just to rejoin the session.
Bali, can you
Dr.
hear me now?
Walstra, yes, I can hear you. Do you want to share your screen?
Oh, all right. I can see it shared. Let me, must I stop sharing and share again?
We can see it.
You say you can see it?
Yes, we can see your slide.
Okay, great.
All right. Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. Our presenter for this session is Dr. Karen Walstra. Dr. Walstra, if you could please just switch on your camera so we can just take a quick picture.
Okay, can you see it now? Bali, can you see me?
Yes, we can take the picture. Thank you.
Cool.
All right. I'm struggling to hear you now, your audio.
Okay, I'm going to switch my camera off. I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'm going to switch my camera off.
I can hear you there. Thank
Okay.
you. All right. Once again, thank you all for joining. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Karen Walstra. She's an independent educational consultant and renowned edu change maker, specializing in creative problem solving, critical thinking, and integrating digital tools in education. She holds a PhD from the University of Pretoria and has led initiatives like the Tandolwazi Teacher Development Program, while also holding key roles in educational transformation. Dr. Walstra, please note that we have 15 minutes for your presentation, followed by 5 minutes for Q&A. I'll keep you posted on the time intervals. Over to you.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. I'm really excited to share this. I love using technology. I love the way technology can really impact how we teach. So we're going to look at the influence of virtual reality as an educational tool on teachers' pedagogy. This was the focus of my research for my PhD. But what I truly believe is that as teachers, we need to change the way that we teach, that digital resources should not be an add-on. They should inspire the learning, they should promote engagement, they should build content and contextual knowledge, and they should encourage thinking, questioning, and remote discussion. So for me, the teachers that I had who participated in the study were intermediate phase teachers, so from grade 4 to grade 6, so primary school teachers, and they were from 4 different schools, which were a range of different socioeconomic backgrounds and circumstances. The technology we used were VR headsets where you put the phone into the headset and then they looked for apps on the phones that were VR related. They then opened those apps and put them into VR mode. So you can see it splits the picture. And then you put that image into the VR headset, which has lenses into it. And then it turns it into a fully immersive experience. And then those headsets are worn. The VR is then controlled by the movement of your head, depending on the little application. Sometimes there is a dot that you move. Sometimes it's just the movement of your head. And most of them have sound. So in some instances, the children sat far away from each other. In other instances, they wore headphones. What kinds of devices did the teachers use? So some of them didn't have VR in their schools and it was new to them. So they used MyKit, which has the VR headsets, and it had cell phones that we then put the apps that they found into it. The one school had both headsets and mobile phones, and another school had the headsets and the learners brought their mobile phones. So how was this integrated into their lessons? The teachers looked at their curriculum and then looked at the outcomes that they wanted to achieve with that. And then they went looking for VR content. So they searched the app stores and the Play stores to actually see what they could find. And there were a range of apps that they came up with that they used within the lessons. They then had those apps on the devices. The learners opened the applications in the VR mode and inserted it into the phones and placed the phones on the headsets and then watched it. So the question was, how does the use of virtual reality simulation as a technology influence the teacher's pedagogy? So looking at the implications of the VR resources for changed pedagogical practices. So the interesting thing was that all 8 of the teachers spoke about an idea of constructionism related to Papert studies, as well as the theory of experiential learning. Then 7 of them spoke about the experiential learning cycle and how that influenced the thinking. 5 of them spoke directly about using constructivism, and 3 of them were constructivist and behaviorist in terms of how they described their ways of teaching. It was also interesting to see what their teaching approaches were. So one person was used the teacher-centered approach. The interesting thing was she was also the youngest member of the participants. 4 of them were learner-centered only, and 3 of them used a combination of teacher and learner-centered approaches. Then looking at the way they actually planned their lessons. 2 of the people used lessons that had been planned for them in their teaching as a whole, not just for the research, and they had to follow lessons. One person actually worked in a collaborative group of teachers where they planned lessons together. Then 2 people actually planned lessons for the group, and you can see that Sarah was in a group where sometimes she planned lessons that other teachers taught, and sometimes she was the person who planned the lessons and gave them to her group of teachers. So in fact, the lesson which she used in the lessons that she used in the VR, she planned those lessons for her colleagues. And then 4 of them planned individually on their own at their schools. In terms of the technology that was used by the teachers, so there was a range of different types of technologies. And you see the 3 that had VR, but all of them obviously used the VR in their lessons. And the other thing that was really interesting was looking at the different ways in which the learners used the VR and the different positions. So it was during COVID, so lots of the lessons actually took place outside. So that's why children were sitting on the grass and things like that. But also some of them were spread out all over the classroom. So some on their chairs, some on carpets and things like that. You'll also see that there was a range of lessons. So within YouTube, you can turn a YouTube video into a VR by clicking on the 3 buttons or looking for the little icon, depending on the phone, and then it made it into the VR. So quite a lot of them used VR. Google used to have this really amazing app called Expeditions, and halfway through the research that disappeared. So that was really sad. But then there were all sorts of other scenarios that they use, such as In Mind, which is a really great app about the brain and studies like that. So what were the challenges the teachers experienced? So connectivity and Wi-Fi was a challenge for some. The lack of resources, so not having their own VR headsets and mobile phones. The lack of personal knowledge and uncertainty of using the technology or sourcing the VR content. And the lack of support or vision of their colleagues to use VR as a technology in the lessons. But for me, looking at the positive side of this is that looking at the various comments related, there were 38 comments that related to VR connections and how it actually influenced it related to their teaching theories, and 122 comments that spoke specifically about the value and the positive side of using VR. So there were many more comments that related to the positive implications, whereas there were only 19 comments related to challenges that teachers experienced. So if we then look at it in terms of incorporating into their classroom practices, what did the teachers observe in relation to acquiring knowledge? So they saw that their learners were much more engaged than within normal teaching strategies. They found that using the content built the content knowledge of their students, that it reinforced this knowledge that the students had, that there was meaningful learner content that they were producing after they'd watched the scenarios, and the learner communication and sharing increased immensely, they found. In all of the lessons, teachers spoke about that. They also said that the children were very excited, that they participated and that they were immersed. That they included having a bit of fun within their lessons. 3 people specifically spoke about how the children were asking more questions than usual, and that the children really loved what they were doing, and that they came across with questions and comments. The teacher described it, it was brilliant. It got them thinking. And then another participant spoke about how VR was used in lessons that the learners could interact well. So Sarah used a scenario of future travel and autonomous vehicles, and she saw the reaction from her students, and she commented and said, the learner engagement and reaction and asking questions and finding more. She said, this is what we want to achieve in lessons. And if you think about it, that is what we want. We want our learners to be excited, to be asking and wanting to find out more. And then in terms of acquiring knowledge with it being reinforced, they saw that the VR scenarios actually assisted with the implementation, that it reinforced their knowledge, and that the children who had watched and listened to stories before, by watching the VR scenario, they were now asking more questions in detail and actually considering the different options in terms of the visual and the oral information that they'd been exposed to. Feeling real was another thing that came across in terms of it, that they were fully immersed and felt as if they were really in the situation. So the teachers described it as the children felt it was bringing reality into the classroom, that the learner reaction feels as if I'm really there. And the contextual learning through the experience seemed to be enhanced, that it was related to real world context and that they could apply it to the real world. So for me, those are also interesting thoughts in terms of how we're teaching our children. And then the interaction within the lessons by the learners. The actual learning experience was exciting for the children. They saw their children learning actively, that they were very focused on the tasks, that it motivated them to learn more, and that the children described it as being involved and immersed in the learning. And the teachers really thought that the children were engaged within it from that point of view. So then if we look at it from their beliefs and attitudes about the use of VR, what did they actually see it as a learning tool? So their beliefs around it were, when asked, what are the teachers' beliefs and attitudes about it as a learning tool? The teachers expressed that there was learning excitement and enjoyment. There was definitely cognitive thinking taking place. They were achieving their outcomes and the impact on their assessments. And there was memory retention that at least 2 of them saw it in assessments that they conducted. So they saw from a learner point of view that the children were excited and that they enjoyed it, that they were discussing things from a creativity point of view, and that they were really motivated and that they enjoyed the tasks and were engaged. And you can just see from these images by the reactions that the children had. And then from a cognitive thinking point of view, that the learners were asking meaningful questions, that the knowledge that they were learning was reinforced, and that they were thinking out of the box. There was a clarity of concepts of understanding information and new knowledge. Mary describes this as she was trying to teach the children about the brain and what the neurons were and how they actually made it. And before the research, she'd actually made a model like this and saw how the children had interpreted it. She then found this VR experience, which is called In Mind 2, where it takes you on a journey where you work through the brain and you play a game and learn about the different parts of the brain. And these were then the models that they recreated after watching the video. And she really said then it helped to clarify their concepts and understanding of the information. And so what was the value of incorporating VR? Was it necessary, or did they see value? And Dira said, absolutely. The learners were involved and interested. She said they used it individually, but the VR reinforced the content in other activities that they were doing. Sarah spoke about how, yes, it was valuable. She said, my pedagogy changed from not using technology much to exploring how to use VR more. She said she even asked the principal to buy VR goggles. Tandiwe spoke about how she was glad that she used the VR in the lessons and that she worked in 2 different lessons and found that valuable, and how the headsets and the resources were useful, and how the incorporation of thinking skills in the lessons could be related. So they used Debono in their skills and found that really useful. So if we then talk about the inferences of using VR in lessons, and was it actually relevant in terms of the research? Was there value that came out of it? 32% of the participants said they saw value in using it in their lessons. 17% said the interaction within lessons was valuable. 16% said the learners had acquired knowledge. 16% said there was a reaction to learning and feeling real. 10% said the VR connections to their teaching strategies. And then there was only 6% of challenges. So in summary, it seemed to be really valuable. So how does virtual reality simulations as a learning resource influence teaching practices? To understand the implications from a primary school point of view, the teacher said it was impactful and beneficial. They observed their learners' enjoyment and increased participations. The teachers reacted positively to seeing learners acquiring knowledge, that learners were being responsive during multisensory and immersive experiences. And therefore it can be implied that the use of VR resources as a learning tool may have positively influenced these teachers' pedagogical practices. I hope you found this valuable and that it was useful to you in the classroom. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walstra. I think these were quite insightful reflections and experiences of the educators. I'm going to open the floor for perhaps 1 or 2 questions or comments. You can raise your hand or just type the comments or questions in the chat. Just a follow-up question. Oh, there, Toby, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation, Doc. I've enjoyed the presentation and the insight that has come out of it. I think my comment is I see that actually when we do this, we bring out a high level of cognitive thinking in our learners, and that also marries with the emotions because they get excited, you know, they want to learn, they see the value of actually coming to learning. I think I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, and I do think that's what we want. We want our children in our classrooms to be excited. Yeah, so yes, I think it is of value.
Yes, I just wanted to find out, how do you suggest integrating professional development for teachers to better integrate VR and other emerging technologies in their pedagogy?
So I think, first of all, it's just looking at what your topic is. So I don't think technology should be used as a babysitter, ever. I think we must make meaningful resources. So it's going to play on your phone and find out which apps would work and which ones relate to the content that you're trying to teach. So when you're planning and you're looking for resources, VR is one of your options. And if you've got the headsets, you can then use it. I don't know if that then makes sense or answers the question the way you were thinking. But for me, it's related always to what you're going to teach rather than the other way around, finding the VR. So from a professional development point of view, it's teaching teachers how to actually find resources on their phones. How do they actually use the Play stores and things to look for resources? How do they use the web to look for resources? Because sometimes there are also amazing VR resources that you will find on the web, and it would be downloading it from a website like NASA or National Geographic. directly as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walstra. We've reached the end of our session. Thank you all for joining. Please note that we do have lunch hour session in the Kumo space. My colleague Bruce has posted the link there, and Lucinda will be leading us in the physical activity. I suppose we've all been right at our computers for a while, so please join there. And please also remember that we do have lucky draws at the end of day 1, as well as day 2. So please join those sessions as well. There are great prizes to be won. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.